The bustling bank lobby buzzed with the hum of conversations, the clicking of high heels on polished marble, and the occasional ding of the electronic ticket system announcing the next number. Rows of customers waited impatiently, some checking their phones, others shuffling papers in frustration. Behind the counters, bank tellers in crisp uniforms moved with mechanical precision, their faces masks of polite efficiency. The scent of freshly brewed coffee from a nearby vending machine mingled with the faint whiff of disinfectant that lingered in the air. In this scene of order and formality, an anomaly stepped through the glass doors. A man in his late 40s, clad in tattered clothes and worn-out sneakers, hesitated just inside the entrance. His unkempt hair and a scruffy beard did little to mask the sharpness in his blue eyes, which scanned the room with curiosity. Carrying a small, weathered backpack slung over one shoulder, he moved deliberately toward the service desk. To anyone observing, he seemed like a homeless man, someone who might have wandered in looking for warmth or perhaps a handout. The first to notice him was Sandra, the customer service representative stationed at the front desk. Sandra, in her mid-30s, prided herself on her ability to spot trouble before it started. Her sharp eyes darted to the man as he approached, and her lips pressed into a thin line. She was meticulous and rule-abiding, traits that had earned her praise from her superiors but made her less popular among her peers. To Sandra, this man represented a disruption, a potential problem in a space where appearances mattered more than intentions. The man reached the desk and offered a small, almost disarming smile. "Excuse me, I need to speak to someone about opening an account," he said, his voice calm but firm. Sandra blinked, taken aback by his request. She glanced at his tattered clothes, the dirt on his shoes, and the faint scent of sweat that clung to him. "Sir," she began, her tone professional but icy, "this is a private bank. We cater to clients with significant assets. Perhaps you might be better suited to one of the community banks nearby." The man's smile faltered slightly, but he didn't react defensively. Instead, he tilted his head and asked, "Are you saying I can't open an account here?" Before Sandra could respond, another bank employee, Paul, approached. Paul, a junior teller eager to impress, had overheard the exchange and decided to intervene. With a nervous grin, he addressed Sandra, "I can handle this, Sandra. No need to escalate." Turning to the man, he said, "Sir, why don't you tell me exactly what you're looking for, and I'll see if we can help." Sandra shot Paul a warning glance, but he ignored her. The man nodded appreciatively at Paul and followed him to a smaller desk in the corner. Paul noticed the strange confidence in the man's demeanor despite his appearance, but he chose to remain courteous. Meanwhile, Sandra walked briskly to the branch manager's office. The manager, Mr. Reed, was a seasoned banker in his late 50s with a no-nonsense attitude. Sandra explained the situation, emphasizing the potential risk of allowing someone like that man to linger in the bank. Reed, always concerned about the institution's image, decided to observe from a distance. As Paul sat down with the man, he noticed the backpack was unzipped slightly, revealing what looked like a sleek laptop. The man's hands, though calloused, moved with an unusual elegance as he pulled out a notepad and began jotting down figures. "May I ask what type of account you're interested in?" Paul inquired. The man leaned forward and spoke in a low tone, his words deliberate. "Something that can handle large transactions and frequent transfers. I'll also need access to investment advisors. You see, I'm considering consolidating some of my holdings." Paul blinked in surprise but maintained his professionalism. "Of course. We have premier services for high-net-worth individuals. May I know the approximate range of funds you'd like to deposit?" Before the man could answer, Sandra returned with Mr. Reed in tow. Reed, who prided himself on being a good judge of character, sized up the man with a single glance. "I'm sorry, sir," Reed said, his tone firm but polite. "We have certain protocols and requirements for opening accounts here. Perhaps it's best if you visit one of our other branches." The man leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Protocols. I see. He stood up slowly, gathering his belongings. For a moment, he looked around the bank, his gaze lingering on the opulent decor, the busy staff, and the queue of customers. Then, with a faint smile, he said, "Thank you for your time. I'll take my business elsewhere." As he walked out, Paul watched him go with a sinking feeling. Something about the interaction didn't sit right with him. Meanwhile, Sandra and Reed exchanged satisfied glances, believing they had protected their bank's reputation. Little did they know, the man they had dismissed so easily was about to turn their world upside down. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the man who had been dismissed so coldly earlier that day sat in a sleek, unmarked car a block away from the bank. He stared at the bank's illuminated logo, a faint smirk playing on his lips. Elon Musk, tech mogul, billionaire, and visionary, was not used to being judged based on appearances. Yet today, dressed in the guise of a homeless man, he had experienced a side of society most rarely see. His intention had been simple, to test the institution's principles and observe how they treated someone they deemed unimportant. Back at the bank, Sandra and Reed congratulated themselves on a job well done, oblivious to the reality of who they had just turned away. Paul, however, couldn't shake his unease. Something about the man's demeanor, his quiet confidence, and the way he spoke about financial matters gnawed at him. He decided to search online for clues about their mysterious visitor. Hours of digging led him nowhere until he stumbled upon a recent social experiment conducted by a high-profile entrepreneur in disguise. Paul's heart raced as he connected the dots. The next morning, chaos erupted. News broke that Elon Musk had been spotted at their branch the day before. Photos and videos captured by bystanders flooded social media, showing the disheveled, homeless man entering the bank. The story spread like wildfire, accompanied by headlines criticizing the bank's treatment of customers based on appearances. Sandra's face turned pale as she scrolled through the articles, her stomach sinking with every word. Reed stormed into the office, barking orders to control the situation. Meanwhile, Paul sat quietly, grappling with conflicting emotions, vindication at his instincts being correct and dread for what might come next. Just as the team scrambled to manage the fallout, a press release from Musk's company landed in their inboxes. The announcement was concise yet damning: Musk had acquired the bank overnight. The branch was now under review for its policies and customer treatment practices. The news sent shockwaves through the staff. Panic set in as rumors of layoffs and restructuring swirled. Sandra, who had always prided herself on her professionalism, now faced the harsh reality of her actions. Her colleagues whispered behind her back, some blaming her for the fiasco, while others expressed relief that they hadn't been the ones to confront Musk. Paul found himself in an unexpected position of moral conflict. He wanted to come forward and share his role in treating Musk with respect, but he also feared being seen as opportunistic. Torn between loyalty to his team and a desire for fairness, he decided to wait and watch how things unfolded. At the same time, Musk's team arrived at the branch for an unannounced audit. Led by a sharp, no-nonsense executive named Clara, the team began interviewing staff and reviewing policies. Clara's calm yet intimidating presence only heightened the tension. Employees scrambled to present themselves in the best possible light, hoping to save their positions. Sandra struggled to maintain her composure during her interview with Clara. When asked about her interaction with Musk, she faltered, giving vague responses and attempting to shift the blame onto institutional policies. Clara, unimpressed, made detailed notes without revealing her thoughts. Reed, too, faced a reckoning. His leadership style, focused more on maintaining appearances than fostering genuine customer care, was under scrutiny. Musk's acquisition had exposed the weaknesses in his management, and he knew his future with the bank hung by a thread. Meanwhile, Musk himself remained behind the scenes, observing the drama from a distance. His initial anger at being judged had subsided, replaced by a sense of curiosity. How would these individuals respond under pressure? Would they learn from their mistakes, or would they crumble? The tension reached its peak during a staff meeting called by Clara. She addressed the group with a mix of candor and authority, laying out Musk's vision for the bank, a place where every customer, regardless of their appearance or status, was treated with respect and dignity. Clara emphasized that those who couldn't align with this philosophy would not have a place in the organization. Paul, emboldened by her words, finally spoke up. He recounted his interaction with Musk, highlighting his attempt to treat the man fairly despite his appearance. His words were met with a mix of admiration and resentment from his colleagues. Sandra, in particular, felt a pang of guilt but masked it with a stoic expression. As Clara wrapped up the meeting, she announced that Musk himself would visit the branch the next day to address the staff. The news sent a ripple of anxiety through the team. Sandra spent the night agonizing over what she would say, while Reed drafted a speech to justify his decisions. Paul, on the other hand, felt a sense of quiet resolve. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the future of the branch and the people within it. Would they rise to the occasion, or would the weight of their past actions pull them down? The clock ticked, each second heightening the anticipation of what Musk's visit would bring. The morning sunlight filtered through the high windows of the bank lobby, casting long beams that seemed to stretch like fingers towards the entrance. The staff had gathered in a nervous cluster, some whispering among themselves, others staring blankly at their shoes. The room fell silent as Clara, the head of Musk's inspection team, glanced at the clock and nodded. A collective breath was held as Elon Musk himself stepped through the doors. He was dressed casually, in jeans and a fitted shirt, but his presence was electrifying. Every eye was fixed on him as he surveyed the room, noting the tense, pale faces of the employees. Paul's heart thumped in his chest. He had anticipated this moment, yet standing in its shadow made it feel more real, more daunting. "Good morning," Musk said, his voice calm but authoritative. He paused, letting the room absorb his words. The silence was deafening. "I'm here to talk about values. It's not just about the work you do, but how you do it and whom you choose to become in the process." He turned to Clara, who stepped forward with a clipboard and spoke. "This bank has potential," she said. "But it needs a new direction. We believe in making a difference, not just in wealth but in the lives of people." Musk's gaze fell on Sandra, who stood rigidly, her hands trembling by her sides. He remembered her from the day before, her initial dismissiveness toward him. "Sandra," he said, and she flinched as if he had just spoken her name at an assembly. "Do you believe in second chances?" Sandra swallowed hard, the question slicing through her like a blade. Her mind reeled back to that encounter, the man who had come into the bank, treated like an outsider, and dismissed as inconsequential. She realized now that she had misjudged him, failing to see past her own assumptions. "Yes," she said, barely above a whisper. The answer brought no relief, it was a challenge, an admission of failure. Musk nodded, his eyes hardening with understanding. "Good. Second chances are not just for the lucky few, they're for everyone willing to learn." He paused again, letting his words sink in. Then, his eyes found Paul, who stood with a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. "And you, Paul, you showed empathy when no one else did. That's rare. It's something I want to build on here." The room seemed to shift, a weight lifting from the collective chest of the staff. Sandra's eyes met Paul's, and for the first time, she saw something other than a young, idealistic employee in him. She saw someone who had a core strength, a sense of humanity that she had missed before. "I want this bank to represent change," Musk continued. "Not just in policy, but in the way we treat each other. If we are to succeed, we need to believe in it, live it." The revelation was profound. It was as if a mirror had been held up, reflecting both their failures and the opportunity for redemption. The way they were treated mattered, but even more so was how they treated others. The realization struck deep, igniting a spark of self-reflection in each person present. Paul's face, once marked with doubt and apprehension, now held a soft glow of realization. He had always believed that kindness and empathy were fundamental to leadership, but now, with Musk's approval and recognition, he felt validated. This wasn't just a win for his conscience, it was a call to action. He resolved to be the voice of compassion in the bank, helping build a culture where people felt valued, not just as clients but as human beings. Sandra, on the other hand, felt as though she had been awakened from a long, self-imposed sleep. The encounter with Musk had triggered a painful but necessary shift. She began to understand that her success had been built on superficial values. But now, she realized that true growth lay in humility and a willingness to learn from mistakes. That day, Sandra vowed to change, not just for the bank's benefit but for her own. When she met Paul's eyes, she recognized that he had taught her a lesson she couldn't ignore: courage is as much about admitting fault as it is about leading. Reed, who had spent much of the past week trying to save his own position, found himself at a crossroads. The sharp, commanding voice of Clara echoed in his ears as she reiterated Musk's emphasis on values. For the first time, Reed questioned his past choices. He wondered how his ambition, so often at the cost of genuine care, had shaped his life. It was a sobering thought, but one that nudged him toward making amends. Musk watched the scene unfold with a contemplative expression. He knew the road ahead would be arduous. Transforming the culture of an entire institution was no simple feat, but in that moment, surrounded by people who were beginning to wake up to their potential, he felt hope. Hope that the seeds of change were sown. That evening, Paul sat by the window of his small apartment, the city lights twinkling like stars below. He thought about the long path ahead. It wouldn't be easy, and he would likely face resistance. But now, more than ever, he felt ready. The lesson was clear: sometimes, you find your purpose in the unlikeliest of places and the most unexpected of people. And that, he realized, was the beginning of something new. The days following Elon Musk's dramatic entrance into the bank were filled with a whirlwind of changes. As the weeks turned into months, the transformation sparked by Musk's visit began to radiate far beyond the polished marble floors and glass-paneled walls of the institution. The employees, once hesitant and entrenched in old habits, started shifting their mindsets. They no longer approached their work as a series of tasks but as opportunities to impact lives in meaningful ways. Paul, who had once felt like an outsider in the corporate world, quickly became a pivotal figure in the bank's renewed focus on empathy in community. He spearheaded initiatives that encouraged staff to see their clients not just as numbers, but as people with stories and struggles of their own. With the support of Sandra, who had stepped into a mentorship role and become an advocate for inclusivity, the bank launched programs that offered financial literacy workshops to underserved communities. The impact was profound. People who had once been wary of the banking system began to trust it, seeing it as a resource for growth rather than a symbol of disparity. Sandra's newfound sense of purpose led her to become more involved in local outreach. She partnered with community leaders to organize events that aimed to create dialogue between the bank and the people it served. These gatherings became a melting pot of ideas, bringing together people from different walks of life. It wasn't long before word spread about the bank's transformation. Its reputation shifted from a place of cold transactions to a cornerstone of support in the community. The ripple effect was tangible. Small business owners began to feel seen and supported, young people were inspired to take up finance as a career, and seniors found a new sense of security knowing that their concerns were being heard. Reed's transformation also had a lasting effect. After the wake-up call Musk's visit provided, he dedicated himself to mentoring new hires, emphasizing the values of humility and empathy that he had once ignored. He started a leadership training program focused on emotional intelligence, teaching young professionals that success wasn't measured solely by profits but by the genuine difference they made in the world. Reed's commitment inspired others in management to examine their own practices and foster a culture of positive competition, one where innovation was driven by a shared goal of improvement rather than individual gain. Musk's visit became more than a single event, it evolved into a movement. Clara, who had led the inspection team, reflected on how his simple challenge to live the values had become a rallying cry. Inspired by the changes at the bank, she advocated for similar reforms in other sectors under Musk's influence, championing the idea that businesses could prioritize human connection without sacrificing profitability. This shift had a larger societal impact, creating a ripple effect that extended beyond the bank. Nearby businesses began to take note, rethinking their customer service models and employee treatment. They saw firsthand that success came not just from sharp deals and strategic moves but from genuine care and ethical responsibility. People who visited the bank now spoke not only about their improved financial security but also about the dignity they felt. Musk's own legacy expanded from a tech innovator to a symbol of progressive leadership. His belief that a company's worth was measured by its positive effect on people's lives was an idea that resonated, sparking conversations in boardrooms, universities, and community centers. The changes at the bank made the community stronger, more interconnected, and hopeful for the future. The employees, from the young interns to the seasoned executives, saw themselves as part of something larger than a profit-driven entity. They were contributing to a vision where human value took precedence over corporate facades. In time, other organizations looked to this transformation as a blueprint, integrating elements of empathy, second chances, and community outreach into their missions. And as this movement took root, it shaped a new generation of business leaders who understood that true success was not just measured in fiscal terms but in the quality of lives touched. The day had arrived for the bank's annual gathering, an event where board members, employees, and prominent figures from the community came together to reflect on the institution's progress and set the tone for the coming year. This time, the gathering was charged with anticipation, as everyone knew that Elon Musk would be attending. The man who had shaken up their lives was now a full-fledged participant in their journey, an unexpected guide whose influence had shifted the entire dynamic of the bank. As the room filled with expectant chatter, a hush fell when Musk entered, flanked by Sandra, Paul, and Reed. The employees were still grappling with the fact that they had seen him only a few months earlier as an unknown, scruffy figure asking for a loan, now sitting confidently on the stage in a tailored suit. Musk's eyes scanned the crowd, settling on the faces that had once cast him aside as just another homeless man. He cleared his throat and began to speak. "I came here today not as an outsider, but as someone who believes in what you've all become," Musk said, his voice rich with emotion. "This bank has transformed, not just in its practices, but in its soul. And that's why I'm here. To commit to a partnership that can expand this message beyond these walls and into every community that needs it." A murmur of awe swept through the room as he spoke. Paul glanced at Sandra, who wore a small smile of pride. She had worked tirelessly to turn their shared vision into reality. Reed, the once jaded executive, nodded, realizing that he had not just witnessed change, he had become part of it. Just as the applause began to rise, a voice from the back called out. It was Clara, who had spent months advocating for reforms inspired by Musk's challenge. "What does this mean for us?" she asked, her voice strong, eyes unwavering. Musk's smile widened. "It means that today marks a new beginning, not just for the bank, but for everyone who has felt like they were worth less than they truly are. This partnership will enable financial literacy, outreach programs, and a focus on community support that will make a real difference." The room erupted into cheers, but then an unexpected tension emerged. One of the senior board members, Mr. Whitaker, a man known for his strict adherence to profit margins and tradition, stood up. He cleared his throat and pointedly addressed Musk, "And how can we be sure this isn't just another publicity move?" Silence blanketed the room. Musk stood up, his gaze unwavering as he met Whitaker's eyes. "Because I'm not here for my image. I'm here because I believe that real change starts with a single act of courage, and that courage begins with people who dare to believe in each other." A wave of emotion rippled through the employees. Paul stepped forward, his eyes glistening. "Mr. Musk, thank you. We're not just here to do business anymore, we're here to change lives. And it started with you." The tension broke as Whitaker, still somewhat skeptical but moved by the sincerity, nodded his approval. The applause returned, louder this time, resonating with newfound hope. The bank, which had once been defined by its rigid policies and bottom-line focus, now stood as a symbol of redemption and compassion. As Musk took his seat again, he glanced at the employees, the community leaders, and the board, and saw not just a room of professionals but a room of believers. It was the moment when the past and present met, and the promise of what could be shimmered in the eyes of everyone there. This wasn't just a deal or a strategic maneuver, it was a movement. A realization that true change starts when people choose empathy over expectation and courage over conformity. And for the first time in a long while, hope felt like something tangible. As the applause subsided and the guests filed out of the hall, the echoes of Musk's speech reverberated through the air. It was not just a promise, it was a blueprint for a future that felt attainable, for a world where wealth and compassion could coexist. The atmosphere was electric, buzzing with conversations that carried the weight of possibilities. In the weeks that followed, the changes at the bank began to unfold. New initiatives were rolled out, financial literacy programs for the underprivileged, small business grants, and mentorship opportunities for young entrepreneurs. For the first time, the bank's mission was intertwined with the very fabric of the community it served. Employees who had once been skeptical now walked into work with purpose, their eyes alight with a sense of belonging to something greater than profits. Sandra found herself working late into the evenings, not just out of duty, but out of excitement. She and Paul, who had once been on opposite ends of the spectrum, now shared an unspoken understanding of what they were trying to accomplish. Their collaboration had become more than just business, it was the foundation of a movement. One afternoon, Sandra sat down with a small group of staff in the break room, recounting how far they had come since the days when profit margins were their only measure of success. "It's not just about numbers anymore," she said, the sincerity in her voice making her eyes glisten with emotion. "It's about people, about giving them a chance." Meanwhile, Reed's transformation was perhaps the most profound. He had once been the man to turn away requests for funding, citing strict policies and an unwavering focus on bottom lines. But now, as he met with local leaders and visited small businesses that had received support from the bank, he saw the tangible impact of what had been set in motion. One evening, as he watched a young entrepreneur's eyes light up while explaining her dream of expanding her bakery, Reed knew his path had changed. The future he once saw as a mirror of the past was now a canvas, full of color and possibility. Musk, too, felt the weight of his choices but in a different way. The media had picked up the story of the man who had walked in as a homeless figure and walked out as an agent of change, but Musk's focus was never on the headlines. He walked through the bank's newest community center one morning, a place that had once been a dusty, unused space now transformed into a hub of learning and opportunity. There, a young girl tugged at his sleeve, showing him a drawing she had made, an illustration of a hopeful, brighter future. He knelt down and smiled, the image seared into his memory. "I'm glad you like it," she said shyly. "I do," Musk replied. "It's exactly what we're trying to build." That evening, as he sat in his office looking out over the city, Musk reflected on how the course of his life had intertwined with those at the bank. It wasn't just about what he'd done, it was about what had been done to others as a result. People were no longer defined by the clothes they wore or the power they wielded but by their ability to create, contribute, and inspire. The community had started to shift, too. The bank's initiatives had spurred conversations in town halls, libraries, and classrooms. People who once felt disconnected or unseen now felt like active participants in their future. The ripple effects were clear, this wasn't just a local change, it was the start of a larger movement toward compassion-driven capitalism. As Musk looked at the stars above, he understood that real legacy wasn't defined by wealth alone but by the lives touched, the barriers broken, and the hope ignited. The journey of discovery, transformation, and connection had left a mark that would resonate for generations. And so, the story of the homeless man who changed a bank wasn't just a tale of irony or redemption, it was a testament to the idea that even the smallest acts, when powered by purpose, could shape an entire world.